This is Join Us in France, episode 362. Bonjour, I'm Annie Sargent, and Join Us in France is the podcast where we talk about France. Great places to visit in France, French culture, history, gastronomy. Today, I bring you a conversation with Dan Funsch about his trip to France on the footsteps of his grandfather, who was a soldier in World War I. Dan went to several places to retrace his steps, and our conversation will take us to Reims, several places in the Marne and Bas-Rhin departments, Strasbourg, I guess, and Paris. Lots of people have relatives who served in France, both during World War I and World War II, and going in their footsteps is a wonderful way to learn about history and honor their memory. For the French expression of the week, let me ask you, how do you say trick or treat in French? Do you know? I'll tell you. After the interview, I'll update you on the new way again to get your health pass for a visit to France. And I'll tell you about my trip to Périgueux last week and my upcoming trip to Paris. If you like what we do here at Join Us in France, consider supporting us by visiting joinusinfrance.com/boutique to check out my cookbook. Join us at the table. It's almost Thanksgiving. You might need some inspiration. My Paris tours on the Voice Map app. And by the way, podcast listeners get a discount if they buy from the boutique instead of buying from the app directly. And my very popular itinerary review service where I help you craft the best vacation in France, specifically for you. The itinerary reviews are going to go on vacation until January. So if when you visit, you see that the page is turned off, that's because I need some time off. I've been doing a ton of these and it's wonderful, but it's a lot of work. Follow Addicted to France on Instagram to see the photos that Dan submitted to illustrate his trip to France, and I will post them this week. And of course, the best way to stay in touch with me and with the podcast is to sign up for the newsletter at joinusinfrance.com/newsletter, because every time I find out some solid news about how to get the health pass or anything of that sort, I send out a newsletter. I haven't done it yet because the information is still a bit shaky. You will see. Bonjour, Dan, and welcome to Join Us in France.
Well, thank you, Annie. Bonjour. I'm so glad to be here today. I'm looking forward to speaking with you.
Yeah, it's lovely to talk to you. So you took a very interesting trip to France a few years ago, and I reached out to you because I was really interested to hear all about it. Your grandfather, your paternal grandfather, served in World War I in France, and you decided you wanted to retrace his steps in a way.
That's correct. He had taken photographs during his service with the American Expeditionary Force, which I don't think you would be allowed to take today. There are pictures of combat, there are pictures of soldiers, there are dead soldiers, there are pictures of prisoners of war. But the most interesting pictures for me were all the places he had visited. And he had taken pictures of himself in these various locales. So we were able to identify the locales, and our goal was to go there, find the locales, and to recreate as many of the pictures as possible.
Oh, that's great. See, it's good to be a shutterbug, right?
It is. And the other thing that's good is he labeled every photograph.
Oh, even better.
We didn't just have a pile of photographs where we didn't know where they were. They were labeled, who was in them, where he was. He did a good job.
Yeah. So do you speak French? Do you have a connection to France other than this war connection?
Well, I think I speak French. I've studied French ever since I was about 12 years old, through high school, through college, and even as an adult have taken advanced French courses at the university. I would nowhere call myself fluent. As soon as I get to France, even when I start trying to speak French, people flip to English almost immediately. So I think I take the hint. I take the hint. It's hard to practice.
It's hard to practice. If you're not in a country for a long time, it's really difficult.
But I feel very comfortable in France, and I'm somewhat conversant, so I'm way past just asking where the bathroom is.
Uh-huh.
I enjoy traveling in France. My wife and I have been to France several times, and so this trip we took in 2015, and it's been the most recent time that we've been there.
Right, and hopefully you'll come back at some point.
We will hope to come back
when this whole pandemic nastiness is better.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so you actually came in the Eurostar from London, is that right?
That's correct. We had been in England for a week, and just for the experience, we decided to take the Eurostar, interested in driving through the tunnel. I don't know what I expected, but it was like any other tunnel, except it was about 20 minutes.
Uh-huh.
And then all of a sudden you pop up in northern France, Picardy, and then we arrived at the Gare du Nord.
Right. And so that was just, not that different from anything else you had experienced.
No, it was not that different, but it's kind of like, well, we've been through the tunnel, so make nice conversation at the dinner.
That's right. All right. And so then you rented a car to get around France.
Yeah, so we rented a car immediately. We'd already pre-rented the car at the Gare du Nord and left for Reims. We spent our first night in France in Reims, which was a lovely town. I don't know what I'd expected, but it exceeded expectations.
Mm.
The cathedral was fascinating.
Oh, yeah.
And one of the things I learned at the cathedral sort of set the tone for the whole trip. One of the things that I came away from with the whole trip was the determination of the French and German people to live in peace.
Mm.
That part of France, Reims and Champagne and Alsace-Lorraine, all the way out to Strasbourg, there are numerous, posters on the walls as you drive by, proclaiming peace. Mm-hmm. That never again can we go down this path of nationalism and fight each other. We tried that, and it didn't work.
It was bad.
It didn't work, It was bad.
Yeah, it was bad for both countries, really, if you think about it. It was terrible for both countries.
Certainly there were winners and losers, but everybody came out worse off after the whole thing.
Yeah.
I did notice, and they made a big deal at the cathedral in Reims, of the reconciliation between Charles de Gaulle and Konrad Adenauer in, I guess it was 1962. Adenauer came to the Reims Cathedral, and they had a public mass of peace and a mass of reconciliation. Mm. And that seemed to be a theme throughout. Maybe when we talk about the Verdun battlefields coming up a little bit, there were things that happened there things that happened on our trip that furthered this theme.
Yeah.
So we had a great time in Reims. We toured the champagne cellars at Taittinger or Taittinger, I guess they'd say it.
Yeah, Taittinger.
We spent Taittinger. And so we spent one night there, and I think that's a place I'd go back to and spend a couple days.
Oh, yeah? You'd spend more time there?
Mm-hmm, I would.
Because you really enjoy champagne, or to do more history?
More the history. I realized lots of interesting things happen in Reims. And it's a lovely area. There are the whole champagne cellars and all that tradition. But it was a beautiful city to walk around and dine outside, so we had a great time.
Oh, that's good.
It was a good start to our trip in France.
Yeah, it's been so long since I've been to Reims. And I was very young too. So, when you're like 21, 22, you don't see life the same way you do as a mature person. That's
true.
But I do have fond memories of it.
Good.
I'll just have to
maybe you'll get up there. You and Elise can go and visit it and do a thing about it.
That would be lovely. It would be very fun. All right. So then you also went to Valmy.
Well, we did. We happened upon the battlefield of Valmy, and that was an education for me. It's a beautiful place. There were even poppies growing in the field at the time, and I learned that Valmy was the first military victory of the French Revolutionary Forces. It was in 1792, where French Revolutionary Army stopped the Prussians, and so that's sort of. There's parallels to American history when the Continental Army was able finally to exercise its might against the British Army, and this is a parallel situation in French history.
Yeah. Again, this is old history, but the locals haven't forgotten, have they?
No. And there's it's the battlefield. I don't think there's much there not like an American battlefield that's been preserved with driving around in monument explanatory plaques. This is just an open field, and there's a plaque and a monument on the side of the road that tells you what you need to know about it. So we just stopped there, saw it. We were on our way to Saint-Menehould in the Marne region. And we stopped. That was kind of our base of operations for the Verdun and the World War I elements of our trip.
Ah, so you just stayed in that one place for several nights.
Well, we stayed there when we were doing the stuff related to my grandfather. After we had done all that, we managed to go further east to Strasbourg, which was such a discovery of a wonderful place.
Yeah.
I told all my friends back here in the United States, say, well, if you want to go to France and you go to Strasbourg, I mean, it's
beautiful place.
It's everything rolled into one.
Yeah, it's really beautiful.
Well worth.
A strong flavor of the mix between French and German cultures, but a gorgeous town, amazing cathedral. The astronomical clock is not to be missed inside of the cathedral. And it's just a beautiful walk around the town and everything. I don't know what you like best about it, but I would love to spend several days in Strasbourg.
Well, we certainly liked the cathedral. It's spectacular. And the clock is so interesting, so many elements to it. In fact, we went back to make sure that we arrived to see the full display on the hour.
Right, it's on the hour. Is it every hour? I think it is.
I think there's something every hour. There's something at the half hours. But then there's a large scale where everything moves. The apostles come out. The death comes out and chases people. The clock crows. Everything moves. It's an amazing thing because it has an outside element
and
an inside element.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that was very interesting. But Strasbourg itself, just walking around, I didn't realize that the medieval part of the town was on an island. And so you can take a boat tour and go around and it'll show you all the things. You can see the building for the European Parliament.
Yep.
That's there. There are just so many interesting things, narrow little streets. The light show on the cathedral is stunning.
Yeah.
When it gets dark, I don't even know how to put it into words. It took our breath away.
Yeah.
There are these colored lights that play on the facade. It's very spectacular.
And they play music at the same time. Yeah,
they do.
It's marvelous. Okay, before we get too long into Strasbourg, I do want to go back to the places you visited. Where your grandfather had been, which are obviously places that nobody's ever heard of because they are war fields and places of battle and not necessarily touristy places. But that's how it works, isn't it?
It is. He was involved with the Meuse-Argonne offensive, right, in 1918 towards the end of the war. He was a physician, and he was assigned to Field Hospital number 11.
Okay.
So we were able to search the American war records to find from the war records the exact location of this hospital and kind of its history. And that dovetailed with his pictures. So we stayed at Saint-Menehould, which is it's a small town, or it's a good-sized town. I don't know that it has a lot in itself that would warrant a stop there, but it was conveniently located for us on the western edge of the Argonne forest. So we took some day trips, and we ended up in several small towns, Grisot, Passavant, Beaulieu, and using his pictures, we could see the tree line and the outline of buildings in the far distance on the tree line or on the ridge line. And using those pictures, we were able to get close to the regular spots and then use the pictures to fine-tune exactly where the hospital had been and where he had been.
Wow.
So that was really neat. We did tour through, we drove all around. We ended up passing through Varennes which is very interesting. The bridge is there where Louis XVI was captured as he and Marie Antoinette were attempting to flee France.
La fuite de Varennes. Yeah. That's a great story, yes.
And so we went through that. We ended up driving through the Argonne forest. And as you drive through there, the trenches, craters from the shelling, those are still clearly visible. We stumbled upon, when I say stumbled, I mean we hadn't intentionally gone there. We stumbled upon the German Crown Prince's bunker, from which he directed most of the action, and that's still there. It's in the woods. You can go in there and walk around. You have some spiders you have to contend with, but you knock the spider webs out of the way and you can go in.
Wow.
And we have a picture of my grandfather in the same place, only the year after the Crown Prince had been there.
Oh, wow.
So that was all very, very interesting.
Yeah.
The final part of the World War I elements of the tour, we went to Verdun.
Right.
Now, the Battle of Verdun was over by the time he got there. That was earlier in the war, that terrible siege or bombardment of the area around Verdun. And but we were driving through the battlefield of Verdun and came upon, unexpectedly, we came upon a commemoration. We were driving and we saw off to our left through the trees, there were people standing there and there was a military band and we could hear music about 100 yards off to our left. So we pulled the car over, stopped and got out. And it was a commemoration at the site of a tiny town that is no longer there. It was just blown off the face of the map. Fleury devant Douaumont. And that town is no longer there, but there is an annual commemoration. And this was so fascinating. There were gathered there perhaps 100 people. There were French anciens combattants, French veterans. There were German veterans in their uniforms.
Yeah.
There were EU people in EU uniforms. Each group had a band, a little military band. There was the head of the département. There were lovely school children there laying flowers. So each group made a little speech, laid a wreath, and then they stood back when all that was done, and all three national anthems were played. The Marseillaise, then the German national anthem, and then the EU anthem, which I found out is Beethoven's Fifth.
Yep.
And everyone is respectful. They take their caps off, and then everyone hugs, and they greet each other, and there's a little refreshments down the hill in a tent. It reinforced to me that way in which we can share the memory of a divisive event, but sharing the memory in a way that unites rather than divides.
Yeah.
It was very meaningful. It was a beautiful day. I think I took, I have some pictures that I sent you, and I also have a video that contains part of the music. And so I don't know if that video will end up on your show, on your site, but
we'll see.
It was very moving.
Yeah. I'm getting all choked up just hearing about it because there are a lot of villages like that. I mean, not a lot, but many, too many, that just got completely wiped away. And that including men, women, and children along with it, with the village.
Well,
and so
they fled.
Yeah.
But there was nothing to come back to. So.
Yeah, no, it's terrible. And like you pointed out, it's so much better that we don't become, what's done is done. These people are not going to come back just because we keep fighting over it, you know. Just try to get beyond it and be respectful of the dead and do the best we can today.
And have resolve for a better future.
Yeah. You know, this desire for a better future animated many people who lived through some terrible times in both World War I and World War II. And I'm afraid that in today's divisive times, too often we forget that there are people who actually went to the concentration camps, like Simone Weil is one of them. She was a prisoner as a Jewish young girl in a concentration camp. Several members of her families didn't make it out. And yet she spent, as a French politician, she spent the rest of her life preaching for understanding and building Europe so that this would never happen again.
Well, we have hope for the future.
Yes, we have hope for the future.
And we went to the American cemetery, the World War I cemetery, the Meuse-Argonne cemetery out, I think it's at Montfaucon, to the east of the forest. It's a sobering place. That whole area surrounding Verdun, the remnants of the disturbance on the landscape is still very visible. It's a sobering reminder of the cost of the conflict.
Yep.
And as you mentioned, a hope for the future.
Yep.
So after we had done all this relating to my grandfather, and we'd taken a number of pictures, with me standing in front of the same church that we had a picture of him standing in front of almost 100 years ago, or actually more than 100 years ago, we drove to the Vosges Mountains.
Oh.
And we stayed at a little inn, which was owned by a family that is the same family that my great-great-grandmother emigrated from, the Vaccination family. Huh. This is up in La Petite Pierre, up in the Vosges. And this family today owns an inn. It's called Logis Hôtel des Vosges. Uh-huh. It's a family-owned. And my parents, 30 years before we went, my parents had gone and stayed at the same inn. And so they had already made a family connection with the members of his family. And so we renewed that. We stayed there and, chatted and talked with the owner and the son of the owner and sort of got some more family history.
That's great.
We had tried to actually connect the dots with my great-great-great-grandmother to see if we could actually connect the dots with their family tree. And there are a few pieces missing. So we went on some genealogical hunting in the town. And that was interesting because I went to the mairie and asked, were there baptismal records or birth records? And they said, no, those were over at the church. So I went over to the church, knocked on the door. The rector came, sat in the rector's parlor. And I find out that during the French Revolution, all the dates, everything were cattywampus.
They renamed.
They went to a different numbering system and different months. And so it was very difficult to try and find records based on dates. And they actually didn't have the records locally anymore. I think after 100 years or so, they are sent to the departmental archive in Strasbourg.
Yeah.
So that was my next stop. We were going to Strasbourg. So we had a great time in this little town and got to meet some interesting people, some local people in the context of doing this genealogical research. Learned some things about the family had emigrated from central France, where the name had been Germanicized to Veyron, with a W and an H. And so we learned some interesting things.
So they Germanicized it when they went to the U.S.?
No, they Germanicized it when they moved from the central France, which was Catholic, to the Lutheran area in the Vosges.
Ah, okay.
2 centuries ago. Mm-hmm. So the family had left Catholic-dominated France, moved to the Vosges Mountains. They were Lutheran, and at that point, the name became Germanicized, German spelling and pronunciation, which I hadn't known. So that was all very interesting.
Yeah.
And then, so from the Vosges, we traveled down to, we drove to Strasbourg, and as we talked a little bit about, Strasbourg proved to be an unexpected gem. The other part of my family, besides the part that we were visiting here, the other part is German. My last name is from Germany. My great-grandparents were from Germany. So I loved the mix of the German kind of atmosphere and the way the town is laid out, the half-timbered buildings, the food. I loved that, the choucroute and all that stuff, and the French. It was a wonderful combination.
Yeah, and they have great restaurants. They have a really good Office du Tourisme, so a tourist office that really does a good job at, showing people the stuff that they shouldn't miss. It's just a really pleasant, part of France. And of course, if you enjoy either beer or Christmas, this is the place to be. you know,
and you get some lovely Alsatian wine.
Yes, and the Alsatian wines, and and the beers and the wines and the what do they call these vine something? The bars, they have a special name over there. It's in Alsacien. I can't something vine something, and it just means it's a wine.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's a place where you can enjoy the local wine.
Well, you mentioned the tourist bureaus, which are very helpful. Most of my planning for the trip was, at least has always been done, the times we've been there, with the Michelin guide, the green guides, and the red guides, especially for restaurants and hotels. And they have proved to be kind of my Bible for planning out the trip.
Oh, yeah. And now I look at them, too.
So one of the day trips we took from Strasbourg, we drove south to Domremy-la-Pucelle.
Joan of Arc.
The childhood home of Joan of Arc, where she had her experiences, her supernatural experiences.
Yes.
It's still there. The little garden is there. I don't really know if the garden looks like it looked back in the, in that century, but it was a charming place, very interesting, just quiet. Hardly anybody there. And Joan of Arc has always been very interesting to me. I really don't know what to make of her. Every time we have been in France, her statue is all over the place.
Yes.
And you go into a little church in a small town, and invariably there's a statue of Jeanne d'Arc, La Pucelle.
Yes.
Obviously deeply ingrained in the French
definitely
consciousness.
And a lot of that, you mentioned Val-Rémy, a lot of that dates back to those days when the Prussians invaded, and it was a massive loss. And a lot of people used the image of Joan of Arc, saying, we got rid of the English, we can also get rid of the Austrians. And a lot of the statues of Joan of Arc that popped up in France, it happened at that time. So, 1800s, middle of 1800s. And a lot of statues were commissioned. There's lovely stories about how Joan of Arc, it was young girls, like at the Madeleine Church in Paris, there's a statue of Joan of Arc inside, and the story is that it was the young girls who were following catechism so loved Joan of Arc that they decided to use their savings to commission a statue to Joan of Arc to put in their church, and it didn't really happen like that, but it was the story people wanted to hear, like, let's rally around this heroine who saved us before. So it was a big and you see a statue of Joan of Arc in every town, almost every church in France. Honestly,
I've noticed that.
Yeah, so
she's become a patriotic folk hero to encourage the French people in their struggles.
Yes, and at that time, that's all it was. By now, today, brandishing some sort of statue of Joan of Arc or flag of Joan of Arc or something, that would only happen in the more extreme right-wing political type, So by now, she's been kind of how do you say that? They've taken her image, appropriated, I guess, by people who are co-opted. That's the word I was looking for. She's been co-opted by the French extreme right movement, and so people are a bit hesitant to use her image right now. But you do see her everywhere in France.
So after we had been in Strasbourg for a while, a couple of days, we drove straight back to Paris and turned in our car. We did have I want to mention something about Bastille Day. We had been in Paris several times on Bastille Day. And one of the most surprising things to us was the nature of the celebration and the contrast between the French celebration on July 14th and the American celebration on July 4th. We went to the Bastille Day parade on the Champs-Elysees, got there early, camped out. But there were no floats, there were no high school marching bands, there were no civic organizations. It's a military parade.
Absolutely.
It starts with the Napoleonic Guards on their horses, their drums, and then there's the tanks and the airplanes fly overhead and the half tracks and the jeeps. And so it was such a different experience than we had anticipated. I mean, it was nothing bad about it, but it was just different. And,
right.
We also found out that it's very hard to get anything to eat on Bastille Day because we did find finally a little cafe that was open. And so we got a croque monsieur or something like that and didn't perish. But, everything's closed. So that was one of the things we had to learn.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't want to be too picky. If you find a place to eat on Bastille Day, just don't, you eat there. Don't go looking everywhere because, some places will be closed.
Right. And on a different trip, I told you this trip had been organized around World War I. The first trip we took to France, which we're not really talking about, but it relates to this point, we drove from Paris down through the Pyrenees, down through Aquitaine, over the Pyrenees, and into Spain. And I had found all these lovely rural bed and breakfast places out in the country, gorgeous. But we found once we got to these places and it got to be dinner time, we didn't have any dinner. And there was no place around to go eat.
Right.
So I learned something that trip. It's nice to be out in the country and kind of by yourself, but you better plan ahead. Make sure there's a place that you can go for some dinner. Yeah,
you're right.
Anyway, we were in Paris, and we were there on a Sunday. Well, Bastille Day was a Saturday, and we were there on a Sunday, and we were walking around, went to the Ile de la Cité, and we found the Marché aux Oiseaux on the Ile de la Cité, right next to the Notre Dame de Paris Cathedral. What an interesting little place.
It's right
all these birds.
Yeah, it's right outside of the Cité metro stop. It makes it easy to find.
Just north of, it's right there. And it's only on Sundays. And anyway, if you were there on a Sunday, it's just a unique place.
Yeah.
So I had mentioned that we had rented this car. And so we had a few mishaps with the car.
Do tell.
When I got back to the United States, about 6 weeks later, a speeding ticket shows up. And you had a previous episode of your podcast about driving in France, and you mentioned the use of these cameras, that record speeders. And you also mentioned the notion that when you cross the boundary into a town or a city, the speed limit automatically changes.
Yes.
Well, obviously, something happened. So it was. I was a little surprised, because I was trying to be careful. But really, at that point, there was nothing I could do, and it was all very convenient. At the bottom of the ticket was a web address that you can go on and pay your fine in American dollars, and so it was all set up for somebody like me. It was great. I was like, I'm going to go to the bank and get a check in euros, but no.
They'll take your credit card.
They did that. Yeah. And then when we were in the Argonne forest in a little parking lot in the middle of the woods, I backed into a post. And it had a dent on the rear end. Now I have a credit card that I use, a name brand credit card, and I have a good international car rental insurance through that credit card.
Yeah.
So I thought, this will all work out. So I took the car back to turn-in place. It was at the Gare Montparnasse in Paris. And the guy looks at it, and he says, well, you have to pay for this on the spot. And he was very nice. He actually sort of, when he wrote down the report, he called it a petite dent rather than just a plain old dent. He was nice. But he did insist on, I had to pay for it. And that was like 500 euros I had to pay.
Yeah.
And I figured, I'll recoup this when I get back to the United States from my insurance company. Mm-hmm. Not so, because, and it's all paperwork. I mean, I had the receipt, I had the receipt for the money I paid, I had the attendance report that showed where the damage was. There was no doubt, I had pictures. There was no doubt that this happened. There was no doubt that I paid the money. But the insurance claimed that they could not verify repairs had actually been made.
Oh, please.
So they declined the claim.
Oh, wow.
So I was out 500 euros. So that was a cautionary tale. I don't know what the remedy is, because you're sort of when you're at the train station, what else are you going to do? I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, so anyway, it didn't dampen the whole trip, but it did dampen my bank account a little bit.
Yes. So, we had a similar unfortunate experience turning in a car in Germany where they said, and I'm sure I didn't do it, they say that I must have driven over a post or something because the underside of the car was bent. Like the where it wraps underneath the car, where the bumper wraps underneath the car. Mm-hmm. You couldn't see anything on the surface, but they said that I had bumped it there. And I was like, you know what? I would have heard something, and my husband was with me the whole time. He doesn't have great eyesight, so I usually do driving. And he was like, no, I don't think you hit anything. Anyway, they made us pay as well, and we tried to get the money back, and I don't think we ever did. So now my policy is I get the supplemental insurance because it's, I just build it into the price of the car. I'm like, okay, this car, they say it's 40 euros a day. It's not really. It's more like 65 euros a day because I'm going to have to pay for the extra insurance. And so I just, in my head, that's how much it costs. But yeah, it's annoying.
If you do it through the same company that rents the car, then it's all in-house and it's probably easier to get a claim. So.
Oh, yeah. And then what happens is if you've paid for the extra insurance, the amount they asked you for there, the 500, it's for the deductible. So it covers their deductible, which is really silly because a small dent like that, I would know where to go to get it fixed for 200 euros max, But they just charge you the deductible. And so there you go. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
So, but we'll go back. We'll rent a car again. We love having the car. We love the freedom of just deciding to go here, there, there. I know it's not for everybody. The driving in France was, the only thing I would say is, make sure you take a look at the meaning of the signs, the signage.
Yeah.
What the words are, because you're clipping along on the A route, and there's a sign, and you say, I really don't know exactly what that means.
Yeah.
That's not the time to find out. So do a little brushing up on the international traffic signals.
But
it's easy. It's easy.
Episode 16 of the podcast is a pretty thorough description of signs and gotchas when driving in France. And it is very true that you cannot speed at all in France. They will send you a ticket for being 1 over the speed limit. It's ridiculous, but that's how it is. Okay, so...
It's how it is.
Yeah.
And I'm living proof.
Yeah, and they will find you and send you a bill in wherever you live because the car rental company has your address and they're not going to pay for it, so they'll just pass it on to you.
Right.
And that's what they do. So, and if I don't, people ask me what happens if I don't pay it. I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. I've never talked to anybody who's admitted to not paying it, but. As a French person, if you don't pay those fines, they'll just increase. And it'll get to the point where, your 45 euro speeding ticket, because you were barely over, it's going to cost you 3,000 euros. And it's not worth it. Like, just pay for it. Like,
Well, I didn't, I figured if I didn't pay it, it would come to haunt me at the worst possible moment. Like at the border in France or something.
Yeah, I don't think they would stop you at the border, but the car rental office might have a note that so-and-so didn't pay his speeding ticket. Next time you try to rent from them, they might say, dude, you have an outstanding ticket you didn't pay for or something. I don't even know if that's true.
I just didn't want to go that route at all or even risk it.
Yeah. What a trip you had. It sounds like you had a lovely time. Yeah, you had a good time. And, doing the history kind of research like that is so, it's really good. Like, it feels good. It's, even if you end up in small places that nobody's ever heard of. I mean, you sent me some really nice photos. And obviously, you also sent me an outline with all of this conversation and the all the names. It's all spelled out. So if you missed any of the names that Dan has shared with us today, don't worry. you can find them on the episode page. But yeah, it's so fulfilling to just know, I went looking for some ancestors in the south of Spain myself. It was a great trip, We didn't find everything we had hoped to find, but we found quite a bit, and it was, it feels good to do that.
And there's a serendipity. You don't find maybe what you're looking for, but you find other interesting things, and you meet other interesting people, which is, in my view, valuable in its own right.
That's right.
And worth the trip.
That's right. So are you planning any new trips to France?
No. Well, we don't have anything on the horizon.
Okay.
So we're planning a giant family reunion next summer, 2022, of all my father's. It would be his 100th anniversary of his birth. And so all his descendants are getting together. So right now our focus is on trying to get that together and all those people. So it'll be a great time. But I'm sure I'll be back in La Belle France before too long.
Oh, and I got to tell everybody, you actually submitted the photos. So a scan of your great-grandfather's photo and the current photo that you took in 2015. So I'll put those side by side on the website as much as possible, because that's really fun. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you so much for talking to me, Dan. It was a delight.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
And, happy trips to France or wherever you happen to go in the future.
Thank you so much. Au revoir.
Au revoir. Again, I want to thank my patrons for supporting the show and giving back. Patrons get several exclusive rewards for doing so. You can see them at patreon.com/join us. Thank you all for supporting the show. Some of you for many years now, and you are wonderful. And a shout out this week to one new patron, and her name is Beth Holmes-Bozung. Thank you so much, Beth, for becoming a patron and making this podcast possible. And thank you, Heather Fenton, for editing your pledge up. My thanks also to Jamie Shippen for sending in a one-time donation by using the green button on any page on joinusinfrance.com that says Tip Your Guide. Jamie wrote, "So glad I discovered your podcast. It has been a wealth of information for my family's upcoming trip." Merci. Merci to you, Jamie. So like I said at the beginning of this episode, the itinerary review page is going to go dormant for a few weeks. So if you would like to purchase an itinerary review, come back after Christmas, and then I'll be all fresh and ready to help you. And all of those things are on joinusinfrance.com/boutique. All right, let's do this French expression of the week. This week I was in Périgueux, a beautiful town in the Dordogne that I did not know. And we lucked out because the weather was supposed to be rotten. And in the end, it really didn't rain that much. And it was very pleasant. Anyway, so on Halloween night, my husband and I were walking around the little town of Brantôme in the Dordogne. And we heard a little kid say, "Qui veut me donner des bonbons?" Qui veut me donner des bonbons? So who wants to give me candy? Now, there isn't an official way to say trick or treat in French because we don't trick or treat in French. As a matter of fact, this poor kid was the only one. Well, he and his sister were the only ones. And there was a shopkeeper there who was closing up shop. And she said, "I don't have any candy." I felt bad. I didn't have any either. I would have given him some. But it's, in France, Halloween is... some years more than others, but this year we had just one group come through our house. We weren't home, but my daughter was. And I had bought a little bit of candy. And when she went to the gate, it was teenagers. So she still gave them some candy, but she was like, "Oh, that's no good." And they weren't even dressed up. Like, duh. And yes, French people know about Halloween, which doesn't mean that they will do Halloween. Okay, so this week in French news, they changed the rules for obtaining a pass sanitaire, so a health pass, again for visitors. This is brand new, and I don't have reports of people who've done it this way yet. But if you Google how to obtain a health pass in case of vaccination abroad, so that whole sentence, how to obtain a health pass in case of vaccination abroad, you will find it. It's on a website called santé.fr, which means health.fr. I will put a link in the show notes, and we'll send an email about this as soon as I get more information information. Give me a couple of weeks because, I need to hear from people who've actually done it this way. But the gist is this. You have to go to a pharmacy in France, show your original vaccine card and your passport. There will be a fee of, I think it was 38 euros. Not all pharmacies can do this. You have to go to one that's signed up to do it. The website shows all the pharmacies that are signed up on a map. A week ago, when I first heard about this, there were only a dozen pharmacies listed in all of France. And I was like, no, this cannot be real. But actually it is. There's already about 100 pharmacies, and I trust many more will sign up to be part of this program. So you get on the plane with your vaccine certificates, whichever ones you use at home, that will be familiar to the airline employees at home where you are originating from. And from there, you'll have to go to one of these pharmacies in France as soon as possible. This should not make any difference for most of you unless you were planning on getting on a connecting flight or a train immediately. Like somebody emailed me and he was very distressed and I felt terrible for him, but I couldn't really help him because I don't know yet. But there are people who land in the Paris airport and they either get on a train immediately to go to, say, Provence or Strasbourg or whatever, or a connecting flight. And flights and trains require a health pass. Are they going to let them on? I just don't know. It's too soon to tell. So if you're connecting that way, please report. Let me know. I want to hear from you. Annie@journeyssinfrance.com. For those of you who are going to take a taxi to your hotel or to your Airbnb, this changes nothing. Taxis do not ask for your health pass. You don't need it for the metro or the RER. As a matter of fact, most places do not ask for the health pass anymore. I was in a crowded restaurant in Toulouse last night, and they checked nothing. Maybe I shouldn't have gone in, but it was late. It was after a wonderful concert. I was with my sister and her boyfriend and his daughter, and I didn't want to be a stick in the mud, and I am double vaxxed, so I was like, okay, relax, live a little, hopefully I'm not relaxing too much. So, yes, changes, but hopefully it'll work out for all of you. Now, Périgueux was a beautiful town, was much nicer than I thought it would be. Why did I not think it was going to be lovely? I was wrong. And it's gorgeous. There's lots to do we were there for 2 full days, and you can use 2 full days. It was really fun. I will do an episode about it with Elise, and that will include restaurant recommendations and even places in Périgueux that you need to make sure you hit. We followed the tourist office had a map of all the places that are interesting in Périgueux. Périgueux is a very medieval town, Renaissance and medieval, some of both. It has a lot of narrow streets, beautiful Renaissance windows. It also has a lot of Roman ruins. As a matter of fact, I will never forget that beautiful museum, Vezuna it's called. It's absolutely gorgeous. But all the details will be in the episode coming about Périgueux. But really, it was a lovely thing to do. And we found a great B&B where we stayed for 2 nights. And yeah, it was all just right. And for those of you who enjoy reading books set in France, I often get books from publishers and who send me books. Authors write books that are set in France, and authors like to get on podcasts, and so they send me a copy of the book. And most of the time, I don't invite them on. But I just read one recently that I thought was really interesting. It's called The Paris Bookseller. And I'll have the author on. I'll record the interview in early December. So if you've read that book and you would like to ask the author a question, now's your chance. Just email me, Annie@journeyssinfrance.com, and I will ask you a question because I thought it was a really interesting book. And I know lots of you have read it because I've heard it mentioned in the group and such. All right, so coming up next week is it's a 4-day weekend in France for the 11th of November. And I'm going to Paris with my sister and her boyfriend and my husband. And we have a lot of fun things planned. I'm going to get to see a few things that I haven't seen yet, including the Museum of the Police of Paris. That's in the Latin Quarter. And it's the Museum of the Prefecture of Police in Paris. And it looks like they have some fabulous stuff. I get to see the Hôtel de la Marine, which is a new venue that just opened in the last few months. I will also get to see La Samaritaine, which I haven't seen yet. So it's going to be fun. And of course, I'll try a lot of restaurants. 2 a day anyway. And it'll be very fun to be in Paris. And it looks like we might luck out on the weather as well. So I will report on that later. Show notes for this episode are on joinusinfrance.com/362. And next week on the podcast, an episode with Elise about Lafayette and the Hermione, his famous ship. It was a very fun discussion, and so we'll get to remember the great Lafayette. Send questions or feedback to Annie@joinusinfrance.com. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you join me next time so we can look around France together. Au revoir. The Join Us in France Travel Podcast is written, hosted, and produced by Annie Sargent and copyright 2021 by Addicted to France. It is released under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives license.